Last class, we have seen the fundamentals of ADF framework, what components we will be having in the ADF. We have seen the ADF components, basically the architecture, basically what we will be having in the ADF, the model, controller, and user interface. In the model, we have seen view object, entity object, application module, and the data controller and user interface. So view controller model, we call it as MVC architecture, model view control architecture. So without learning, let us see how we can implement web services using the application development framework. Let's start looking into that. Okay, so what I will do to begin with, I will take a simple example, and then we will see how quickly we can consume the web services through JDeveloper, and then we will see how to pass the parameters and how to cache the results back, basically. Right. So to start with web services, in my previous sessions, as I was saying, every web service has the WSDL file. Okay. So to quickly revisit what we have discussed in the web services. So web service, typically we use web services to talk or to communicate between the two systems, right? So between two systems, like example, this is one example. If we are an e-business suite or any custom application, if we have package one here, employee details package, and have another package here, communications package. In this communications package, if I wanted to refer the get full name function, which is residing in the employee details package, I can simply give a database call. I can, from here, I can simply call employee details.get full name. It will simply the package in this function, the function in this package will get called by simple database call, because both these packages are existing in the same database server. Okay, that is good. If these two are different databases, still we can using DB links, or still using some DBA functionalities, we can still call the package, the function residing in this package from another database. We can still do that. What if they're residing in the cloud? On the package what we want to consume is residing in the cloud, and the package where we wanted to refer that package is residing in this local system or our custom application. If it is like that, how can we consume the package or method or a function available in the cloud in our custom database? We don't have access to this database. We don't have access to this through any database links or anyways. We don't have any kind of access, but still we need to consume the functions packages available here. How we can do that? That is the where we actually talk about the web services. Web services is a mechanism which we can use in these cases. Typically we use web services in the cloud products, and more importantly we use it in the software as application service products. In those cases where we don't have access to the database, typically in those cases one will typically expose many methods outside world. The way they expose it, they will expose in the form of a web service, basically. In those cases, this person is called a producer, this person is become a consumer. So consumer should consume the methods exposed by the producer to the outside world. Okay, so that mechanism can be done using the web services. That is the reason I would say it is a producer, it is a consumer, where consumer pass parameters to the producer sends back response to the consumer, and where they will talk to each other. Basically, they talk to each other in the form of a XML format. Basically, that is the way data will be exchanged between those two systems. Why it is like that? Because what if this producer program is in Java and this consumer program is in PL SQL? Then the data types of this Java program might be different in the consumer. Maybe the data format here is different than the data format here. So They came up together into common industrial standards. If the communication happens between those two systems in a common understandable language like XML or a JSON, that will be easy for us to talk to each other, right? Now, the next thing, for any producer, as I said, every producer, most of times any SaaS product or any cloud product, typically they expose some methods to the outside world. When the method is exposed by the producer to the outside world, how do consumer know what is that method, what is the parameter that the method will take, and what is the return type of that method? For that, every producer generates an interface file called WSDL file, that is a web service description language file. Typically, it's in XML format. This WSDL file will talk about methods and arguments return type. If we get a handle of WSDL file, our work will be done in our web services. Okay, right. So that is more important. For that WSDL file, typically, as we are already talking about, so this is one WSDL file. So if we go to enterprise repository, example, if we are in the financial, if we go to SOAP web services, in the SOAP web services, we have the different web services like SOAP web services for common features in the Oracle Cloud. If we click at that, then if we have that business object services, in the business object services, it will say mainers file import and export web service. So this import and export web service will talk about how to import the file into the cloud and how to export the file outside of the cloud. So it is a WSDL file. Okay, so I have this is nothing but common domain application core setup. For instance, typically it is the one. Okay, if you take it up, let us say if I take it and if I keep it here and then go back here, and I will just copy this one and go back here and place this one just like this, and if I keep enter, then automatically my WSDL file is ready. When my WSDL file is ready, this WSDL file will talk about few operations. So if I go here, it has few operations. What it can do, it can upload file to Universal Content Manager. If I click on the upload file to Universal Content Manager, what it takes a document as input. What it returns the result. Result means if returns the content ID of the repository. Whatever file we uploaded, what is the content ID of the repository? And then if it fails, it returns null, right? And similarly, we have many methods like values data loader. It is typically import values from a given data file and stores in the value set metadata table. It is one file, and we actually, this takes as a field ID at repository, contains the ID of the document in the Web Center content repository. So what is the ID of the document? Whenever you upload a file to the Universal Content Manager, it is returning the content ID. If you pass that content ID for that values data loader, then if you pass the content ID, then it loads the values into the system. Basically triggers a import program to load value sets into the system. That's what it will do. Similarly, we have the data loader, typically where we use HCM data loader to load HR data into the Fusion applications. So here we have import and load data. Typically, this program will be initiated as and when we pass the content ID. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Lakshmi, we are here. Yes, we are here, Lakshmi.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi got disconnected.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, let me share the screen. Oh, my screen is getting shared, right? No.
No, we cannot see your screen.
Okay, so let me get that. Just sharing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, so whenever we upload the file into the content manager, typically using file import export, basically the way we do when we are trying to trigger the journal entries using that file-based import export. Typically, what we did, the first step is to load the file into the content manager. Once the file is loaded into the content manager, the content ID will get created. Example, if I am in import and load data, if I click on import file, typically whatever files we have already loaded into the content manager, okay, let it open up. So typically, once we're using this file import and export procedure, and once we load the data, once we load the file, typically we get the content ID basically. So where is it? Content ID. So we have the content ID get created. Once content ID get created, what typically we can do? Once content ID get created, once we have the files in the system, once we have the content ID get created, we can typically go to data exchange. Import and load data. And typically here we can import file, not import local file. Import file means whatever is there in the cloud, that the content ID will be generated here. So it means if you pass the content ID as a parameter to import and load program, then import and load program will trigger, will just get triggered. That's what it will do. So if I go to scheduled process, it's not in this, so I need to enable that. To schedule process. Okay, if I go to tools and schedule process, so typically it takes, if you wanted to load a file that we sent into the HCM cloud, typically we have an enterprise scheduler job called import and load. So typically if for this enterprise, for this procedure, enterprise import procedure, if I pass the content ID as a parameter, and maximum import awareness, whatever, if these two parameters are passed for this enterprise scheduler, then typically what happens? It will get submitted and we will get a request ID, process ID as an output basically. If you keep tracking the process ID, that process ID will say whether the status is success or failure. What if this procedure is automated, or how we can call these procedures from outside system? Okay, that is where Oracle has given web services. So this is the WSDL file. So it is a WSDL file of this data loader basically. This data loader, where this WSDL file has some operations like import and load data. This import and load data nothing but initiates bulk loading of file-based data to Oracle Fusion HCM using HCM data loader, and which takes parameters as content ID, and which takes a parameters. Parameters means load maximum errors or delete the source file after confirming the job, like that. Similarly, we have the manage file import export. Once upload the file to Universal Content Manager in the finance world, Once we load the data into the content manager, typically after that, what we do, we typically trigger the respective job. Import this file into the stage tables, along with, while importing the data into stage table, we also say which interface table we wanted to load the data. Is it a chart of accounts interface table, or journals interface table, or invoice interface table? We mentioned that basically. So every interface table has its own kind of jobs basically. Set of data, import, export. Example here, so every task, basically every task whatever we have sent, basically every task will have the task name. Basically those task name will say that what data has to be imported. Let me show you the complete list. So all in all, what we are trying to do, we are trying to invoke the programs from our in-house applications, or from our custom server. Basically, that's what we need to do. So these are the business object services. Typically, what we need to do in case of finance world, what business object we need to call if we need to load data into the cloud applications, basically. So let me start with a simple example, so that, because in this case I have already got one content ID. This is the content ID I have already. So what if I call a web service? This is a web service I have. This is a web service I have. This web service, this content ID, I know the content ID. So I will call this method, which is available in the cloud, which will take the parameters as this content ID. Sorry, parameter first name is content ID. Parameter second name is standard parameters for their parameters, and which will return the request ID. Request ID means whenever it initiates the import and load job, it returns the request ID. I will catch the request ID. Once I get the request ID, what I will do, I have another method here called get dataset status. What this method will do, this operation will provide information required for monitoring systems to understand the status of error messages raised by the dataset. So whenever a process ID is submitted, based on the process ID or the content ID, it takes two parameters. One parameter, this parameter passed as name and value pairs. Name and value pair means content ID and content value, or process ID and process value, or dataset name and dataset value. So we have to provide any name and value. Example, we have to pass and go to data exchange here. So assume that you have submitted the job. Once you submitted the job, typically this job will get submitted. Once the job gets submitted, how do we know the status of the import or load? How do we know how much is loaded, how much is complete? How do we know that? To get that status, typically this method is useful, get dataset status. This get dataset status typically provides information required for monitoring the systems. So what I will do, once job is submitted, I'll get the dataset status based on content ID, or based on the concurrent job ID or enterprise fielder request ID, or based on dataset name. Anything I can pass, anything as an input to that get dataset status, and I can keep getting the status. Okay, so I can do once I get the status. If I get the status as error, okay, if I get the status as error, then I know that the program got errored out. Okay, so let me draft down what I am saying, and then we can okay, so business case. So what we will do, the first step we will do, so in our case, I have loaded the file already. Okay, so let us talk the step by step, and I will show what we will try to do today. So first step, prepare file. Okay, next step, once you prepare the file, then send file to cloud, that is to UCM. Once we send to UCM, what we get? We get the content ID. Okay, once we get the content ID, what the next step? Next step is to submit import and load program. Import and load program based on what? Based on parameter as content ID. Okay, this is my parameter. Once the content ID is passed and loaded the job, basically, then what we need to do, next step? Next step is to keep tracking the status of the load. Okay, so keep tracking status of the load, and let us say if it is successful. Okay, let me do that. And if it is success, then exit. Okay, let's clean exit. And if it fails, what we need to do? If fails, then if the record got failed, then if it is success, then you are just exiting out. If fails, example, if fails, then typically what we need to do, we need to figure out. If fails, then we need to figure out the find the error count. Okay, so find the error count, or find the error count in many ways we can do. Find the error count if greater than 40%, let us say threshold. If greater than 40%, alert. Okay, greater than 40%, maybe what you can do, you can send alert people. Okay, or if it is, and both the cases, typically we have to do perform one more step. In even if it is greater than 40, less than 40, typically we have to get what records got failed. Get what records are failed. Okay, and once what records are failed, then typically what you need to do next? Once we have the what records got failed, next step is to prepare the file again. Prepare the file for the error records. So it is a typical process flow. Okay, so in this process flow, typically we have to follow this process flow, and we have to automate this whole process flow. If it is a real implementation, we have to process this all process flow. Okay,
here the alert is for third party or for the Fusion?
I'm talking about third party. Basically, if we are working in any company needs to get alerted, right? Saying that, hey, these many failures are there. Make sure someone is aware of it. So it can be anything. Basically, it can be third party or users in the Fusion application. Can be anything. Because all these things, what I'm talking here, is completely a custom solution. Basically, it's not something we are building out of Fusion.
Yeah, of course, understand. But thing is, if it is alert to the third party,
yeah, we can do that.
If it is alert to the third party, then the modified resubmitted the data.
Okay, so who modifies the rows here, basically? So if the example, if there's really a data issue is there, if we have data issue, then typically third party should come and correct the data. What if the data is right, but what if the data is, our procedure, our methodology is wrong while preparing the file? That is the case. Basically, we will be taking care of here. Even in that scenario, if we have an example, Let us say if we have any data issues, if there are data issues, then send the file, send the bad records to third party, whoever is saying, so that they will correct in the source system, whatever system they are looking for. Does it make sense? Srinivas?
Still confusion with this, sending up the records to the third party. So what is the difference between an alert and this one?
So what I'm saying is, let us say example, you have to prepare, let us say example, you need to load the job into the cloud. Let us say example I'm saying. So to load the data into the, to load the data into the job data into the cloud, typically what you need to know, you should know what fields you have to send for the job. Okay, we need to send the job name, and we have to send the job code, and you have to send the date. Example I'm saying. In this case, date should be in the proper format, not null, and the format should be right. Okay, and job code is mandatory. Okay, for example, if job code is not available in our, while preparing the file, you prepare file from the source system, right? In the source system, job code is not there. If job code is not there in the source system, even you prepare the file, it's of no use. I mean, that is a data issue. Job code is must. If job code is not there, you cannot prepare the file. So those kind of things are called data issues. Because of that, this program got failed. Example I'm saying. If that is the case, then if job code is not available, send the records to HR person or financial analyst who is responsible, saying that, hey, these records, there is no job code is not there, it's blank. Make sure you have job code in the source system. You can say that. Example, if that date is null, when date is null, typically what you need to do in your file, if date is null, typically it's our requirement, if date is null, to send some date. And as an IT, we fail there to send a date. So that is called some process issue. Then in that case, this preparation of file is needed. So based on the errors what we find in our program, based on errors what we find, basically we have to identify it is a data issue or our logical issue. If it is a logical issue, re-prepare the file. If it is data issue, ask the respective coordinators to correct the data. And the next run, automatically our process will pick it up and again prepare the file and sends it to the cloud. If in typical real world, that's what happens basically. Okay.
Here on the left side, left bottom, there is alert, and we are sending some data to the third party.
Yeah.
So what kind of information alert will contain, and what kind of information the data issue with the data issue. Data issue is an expected issue. Okay, so
okay, I would say bad records to the owner of that source system. I want the third party.
Then what alert will contain?
So okay, so typically example, let's assume in this scenario, let us assume that you are sending the payroll data to the cloud, and payroll data is very important. That if that data is failed to load in the cloud, then payroll won't get processed. For some reason, if we have more than 40% employee records were not loaded into the system, it means that they are not going to get paid on the next day or whatever. Then immediately someone has to be alerted. It is a very critical issue, that is something went wrong. That is the time I'm saying that alert the VP or director, whoever it is, as saying that in your 40% of your population are not loaded to the cloud. It means that person will take the escalation or whatever and make sure the things will get done. Right? That's what I meant for basically as part of the process. That's what I'm saying. If it is more than 40%, alert it. If it is less than 40%, maybe it is a day-to-day process issues, something we can take it on next day or something like that. Understood? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here, this is what the typical process is. So there are three things. One is preparing the file is source system. We will do that. Uploading the file, typically that is the place where we have to talk to the cloud and load the file. And submitting import and load program, again, that is the place where the cloud we have to do the operation and keep tracking the status where the job will get submitted in the cloud. So to keep tracking the status, again, we have to talk to the cloud to get the status, and remaining everything can be done in our local systems. So main thing here is, here we need to talk to the cloud, here we need to talk to the cloud, here we need to talk to the cloud, and again, here also we need to talk to the cloud. Example, how many records got failed? Example, these two places, right? So we need to get the total number of records those got failed. So typically what I do to find the number of records get failed, typically I use BA report here. BA report, which runs in the cloud and which will take parameters as content ID or the file ID, whatever. So this one, what it will do, this process will actually take that content ID as a parameter and returns me the total number of records got failed. And in my system, I will evaluate. In my custom system, in my custom program, I will evaluate what are the error records, if it's data issues or a programmatical issues or some other issues. So based on the error that this report returns, I will start preparing the data and send it back, basically, right? So what I was trying to, I will be covering in today's session or in our current process flow, I will try to cover till here, till this process, 1, 2, 3, 4. And once I complete the outbound integrations, I will cover the remaining process. When I talk about outbound integrations and I talk about reporting, how to create report, how to develop report, then I will talk about these things, and then I will resend the data back to the file. Okay. Right. Now coming back to this, talking to the system, and again in this case I will narrow down to one scenario, and then because if I talk about multiple scenario, it takes a lot of time. So one scenario, what I will take, let us say I have sent the file to the cloud and I have the content ID. So as I have copied here, if I have the content ID, then how I can submit the job through web service, and how I can keep tracking of that status of the job in the cloud. How I do these two things, example. Okay, for that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Lakshmi.
Yeah.
This particular thing, sending file to cloud, how will we do it programmatically? So using that WSDL which you showed.
Okay, so in this case, when I talk about this content ID here, in this case, if I talk about this WSDL, this WSDL don't have the ability to send the file to the cloud. If you see, these are the operations this WSDL has. This WSDL operations, what it do, it actually import and load data, get data set status, and get definition, object, attribute hints. But how we can load the cloud file in HCM Cloud, how we can load the file into the loader is actually, we have one utility called Web Center Content Utility. We have a Java command. Basically, using this Java command, we export the data into the cloud. So it is a command
from the local machine.
From the local machine, a Windows machine or Unix machine. So what all we need to do?
So you run this on the local machine.
Yes. So I will run the first step. I will run this program to load a file. And this program returns the content ID.
So I cannot schedule this program in my Oracle Fusion applications.
No, you cannot. Basically, even this process, whatever I'm saying here, submitting the program in the cloud and keep tracking the status of the load. If we go with a automated way, even these cases you have to take care in your local or custom systems, not in the cloud.
Like in EBS, we could schedule everything, shell script to transfer the data, SQL loader to load the data. But here, this part has to be scheduled or run in local machines.
Exactly, local servers, in your company servers.
And in the finance world also, same JavaScript will be used?
Yes, in finance world, actually, as I was showing here, we have the web service for that. Upload file to UCM.
That web service can be scheduled in Fusion applications?
Okay, let us assume that, let us say if we have scheduled, let's take that scenario. let us say in this scenario, you have the cloud here and you are scheduling the job here. Okay, let us say we're scheduling a job here. So what this job will do, basically, in our intention, this job has to load the file. So what is the file? Where the file will be? What is the file? And what are the contents? How do we know these two things? So our assumption is this file and contents will be in our local system. That's your intention, local system. And whenever this cloud should typically, you are saying that this cloud should typically, whenever you schedule a job, it will trigger something, it will go to local system and get the file contents. Yeah, but that is not the
file contents. It will just bring the file.
Right. So that's what they had to bring the file from the local system, right?
Correct.
So to bring the file from the local system, someone has to prepare the file in the local system, right?
Yes.
So I am coming from there. So what I will do, whenever my file is ready, send that file to cloud. That's what I am doing. As and when it is ready, and send that file to cloud. And
but that is manual, no?
No, that's what we can automate using web services.
Oh, using the JavaScript.
Java web services, yes. So I am reversing it like this. So whenever my file is ready, send the file to the cloud and trigger the program to load data in the cloud.
So the sending system will have responsibility of sending the data to the UCM.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, but the sending system, it's not necessary from local machine to UCM. It can be from any web server.
It can be from any server. Basically, at the end of the day, it is our client responsibility to send it to the destination, the cloud, right? Okay. So whether you will be sending it from that web server to the cloud, or you take at that from web server from a local server and send it to the cloud, that's the client's choice.
But you know what happens? So when I'm doing data migration for a client from EBS to SaaS model, then I only have to do it. So I have to write a script to transfer their file, whatever they have produced, I have to transfer to my UCM.
Correct. That's true.
So I'll have to come up with the script.
Exactly.
Somehow I'll have to schedule the script also.
So in that case, I'll schedule the script maybe in the EBS.
Yeah.
In EBS, I'll schedule that script to prepare the file, send the file to the cloud, and trigger the program to load data into the cloud. That's what I will do.
Right.
Yeah. If it is one-time system, yes, you can do it manually. If it is daily process, then you have to schedule in EBS to do this thing every day.
But that will be using Java, right?
I mean, so these two steps are actually web services. These two things you can do in any program which you are comfortable in. You can do that using Unix, you can do that using Java, or you can do that using PL SQL if your DB allows the connections outside of your database server. You can do in any way, but consuming these web services in the cloud, you can do in any ways, in any different scenarios. I mean, abilities, yeah. Okay.
So it is possible to send a file to UCM using PL SQL script.
Yes, we can. PL SQL also we can consume we can consume the web services using PL SQL too. Yes.
That example we don't have, no, Lakshmi. But that is that is something I need right now. How to transfer data from EBS? How to transfer data file from EBS to UCM?
You're talking through Java is okay, or through?
Any way is okay. I just need to schedule it in EBS.
Yes. Okay.
Can be JavaScript, but it should pick up from whatever address I give, source address.
Okay.
And it should take it to my UCM, cloud UCM.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that example, loading the file into that. I mean, this is the program, but this program is typically for the HCM world.
Yes.
So yeah, if you run this program right away, it will just load the file into that and bring back that content ID. But okay, so I will demonstrate that one too. what all I need to do, I just need to invoke this upload file to UCM. It will, for that I need to prepare a document, and that I need to load the document. But I will demonstrate that one, this uploading the file in the Finance World too. I don't have that in handy, but I will demonstrate that to you maybe sometime in these sessions.
Okay, thank you, Lakshmi.
Okay, right. So once you upload the file to UCM, so in coming back to my scenario, once you upload the file back to UCM, we will have the content ID here. Once we have the content ID, I need to submit the import and load program and then keep tracking of that status. Okay, let us see how we can do that, how we can create the web service, how we can consume it basically. As I said, we can do that in any of your own languages. We can perfectly do that. And using JDeveloper also we can do that in a much faster way basically. That's what I have seen. So once we create that, the web service consumption using JDeveloper, then typically you will create that specific package. Maybe you can say WAR file, and if you deploy the WAR file in your application server, it can be an EBS or custom application server, then those Java programs will keep running, keep generating the once we develop this process, keep generating the files every day, send files to the cloud and submits this program, and this process can be completely automated. Okay, so I will show you how to consume the web services in the JDeveloper and how we can test it out. So I will again go back to JDeveloper ADF once, and again I will go back to this diagram, and I was showing again we have the view, user interface, controller, through which we place the components on the user interface, and we have model, where basically we create entity objects and view objects basically based on the database, and also we can create based on the web services here. So till now what we have seen is we have created the entity objects and view objects and an application module. In that we have the data controller here. In that data controller we have typical number of different view instances, and we have methods too, and we have also seen creating a user interface, typically where we are referring whatever the entity objects we created by contact to the database and showing up on the user interface. We have seen that process already. Okay, so now in this case, instead of consuming data from the database, I am trying to consume data from the web services. That's my intention is. How can I consume data from web services and keep writing my programming language? How can I do that? Okay, so let's do that. Let's see that. Okay, last class we have seen this example. Whatever we have done till now, whatever data we are trying to create in the entity object and view object, and we created it. We created this user interface, typically where you can show the data, and we can keep working on the data. Keep next, like that. Click on the India record will come here. Many application validations we have done here. So these validations are done based on our database. Now what I will do, I will consume this web service and keep playing around with this web service data in my same JDeveloper. Okay, so for that what we need to do, simple thing is go to the model, our project, go to new, and then go to the from gallery. Here we have many tiers: general, business tier, client tier, many things. So in this we have a business tier. In this business tier we have web services. In this web services, typically what is our purpose? Our purpose is to consume the web services. To consume the web services, typically we have many ways. Sometimes I not only want to consume, sometimes apart from consuming, I also wanted to create my own web services. Create my own web services in sense, I want to be a producer. I want to expose some methods outside of my own system, and I want other people to come and consume my web services. So different scenarios, but our scenario is typically consume what Oracle Fusion is providing to us. So for that, you can go to web service data control. What is the use of it is not only consumes the web services available in the cloud, or it can be any system, whatever procedure I'm following, that can be any third-party system who has exposed their methods. As long as you have WSDL file, as long as you have the username and password, you have all the abilities to consume those web services in your system basically. So I'm going to take this web service data control. With this, I'm going to take that, and also once I have that data control, so before closing it, let me again confirm you the fundamentals. So if you see here in our project, till now we have created only the entity object, view object, and application module, and these business components, these 3 business components, and we have application module. So application module has a data control, so it is our data control. We have this data control, and this data control is referring to all the view objects till now. Once you have the data control, what we did, we have created the page. In this page, typically what we have done, whatever data we have in this data control, we dragged and dropped the data control in the user interface and created a page. That's what we did. Similarly, if I have the web services here, web services components here, the web services methods, attributes I have available here, what I can do, I can simply drag and drop here, or I can get that and play around in my complex logics. I can do like that. If I get the web services in my data control, if I have the web service in your data control, typically I can play around in the user interface, and I can play around in the application module, right? So that is what I am achieving here. So I'm going again, new application module, new gallery and web services. In that web service data control, SOAP or REST, click on OK. So let's give a name for this project, what we are doing. So data source name here is, let us say, RB HDL web service. Okay, 1. So what web service we are looking at here? SOAP or REST. Okay, so for that, if you go back to here, so where we got this web service, it's actually SOAP web service. Okay, and what the WSDL is, it is a WSDL file. Get this, copy this one, and get our instance, and in that, whatever we have till here, common domain application code setup, that is actually, this is the one. Take this one. Oh, where I am? Actually, I need to copy this. Okay, so take this one and copy it here, and that WSDL file is ready. If you take this and display it, then you get the WSDL file. Okay, once you have WSDL file ready, then go there and just keep it WSDL file here. Okay, and then if you tab out, it will start
to generate the WSDL file.
So I went to, okay, let me start from beginning. So I'm going to Oracle Fusion repository. In the repository, which web service you want to consume. In our case, I'm going to consume web service in the HCM data loader. So that is global human resources. I'll go to global human resources. In that, we have the SOAP web services. I'm in release 12. Click on release 12. In that, we have the development. On the development, we have the REST API, common features in cloud, and SOAP web services for common features in the application cloud. Click on this one. In that, we have business object data services. Click on this one. In that, we have manage file import and export. Oh, I came to wrong place. Am I into HCM? Yes. Yeah, Oracle has the first one. Oracle HCM Cloud SOAP Web Services. Let's click on this one. So I have the business object services. So in that I have data loader. In the data loader, this Oracle documentation, Oracle document will give this is the service WSDL. So what all you need to do, they will mention what you need to replace here. Whatever is kept in the brackets, HCM domain, HCM core setup. So if I go here, so it is one HCM domain, HCM. This is the one I copied from here, and the below is the one I copied from my instance. So whatever instance our client has, just take it. It is your instance URL. It is a WSDL URL from the documentation. In this we have HCM domain, HCM core setup. Whatever we have here, that one has to be replaced with this domain name. Let's replace it here. That's it. Your WSDL is ready. So
application URL, right?
Yeah. This below one is application URL. That's true. So once I dig it here, then my WSDL is ready. Once WSDL is ready, then it will recognize that we have the WSDL, and it automatically creates a service endpoint too. Okay. Now here it will ask for copy WSDL locally. Do you want to copy the WSDL file definition locally? This is needed when whatever web services, whatever producer, in this Oracle Cloud is a producer. If you think the Oracle producer may not be available, maybe may not be available. If you're not sure the availability of that cloud WSDL, maybe we are not sure the availability of this instance. In that case, what you can copy the WSDL file locally, so that the definition will be retained locally in your project. If you think that this service will be run all the time, you don't have any doubt on that. Typically in cloud instances, it will run all the time. It won't go down basically. So for that, in that cases, if you think that this instance will keep running all the time, you can uncheck it. If you uncheck it, only if you think that web service is keep running all the time. Okay, what happens typically is whenever you try to compile the project, it will go talk to this URL and look for the existence of WSDL file and keep getting the return types parameters all the time. Okay, look at it. Next, it automatically brings what methods we have available in that WSDL. See, it automatically reads and defines that, oh, these are the methods available in the WSDL. So out of all these methods, are you going to use all the methods in your implementation, in your project? Basically, maybe then I will bring all the methods to my project. Okay, click next. Then it will ask, so the response format by default is XML format. Basically, it's always by default XML format. So if you wanted to change the definition of communication, if you want to change the format to CSV, we can still do that. But especially when we are consuming the cloud web services, it's recommended to keep XML only. If it is something our custom thing or some web services which actually takes data in XML and CSV file, then you can keep the format as like that. Okay, so whenever you can, if you want to change the format, typically you have to provide the XML schema definition, these things, but by default you can keep it by default because you will take the default XML format. Next one is important. This is where we have to provide.
So what option you can select? Format. It is both.
I'm keeping XML as the default because that's the standard way of communicating between the cloud and local systems.
But it will access CSV as well, right?
We have CSV as well, but for that, whoever is the provider, they have to accept the CSV data as well. So there's no guarantee cloud accepts that in the CSV format.
If I select XML, so the system will accept the CSV file or not?
It will accept CSV file too. There's no problem in that because you're developing it locally, right? It will allow for now, but while started communicating with that producer, you will see problems actually. You get unexpected exceptions. So keep XML format only. Don't change it when you talk about cloud, HCM cloud or finance cloud. Endpoint authentication is very important. It is a place whenever you create a WSDL file, it will create an endpoint URL. So every WSDL file, what happens is whenever we create a WSDL file, every WSDL file will have an endpoint. Endpoint is nothing but, if you take it out, it will be the endpoint. So what this endpoint will do, this endpoint actually typically authenticates. This is the endpoint, HCM data loader endpoint. Typically this endpoint, what it will do before start talking to the cloud, this endpoint will authenticate that you have a real access to access HCM data loader. What is HCM data loader? HCM data loader is actually an account available in the Universal Content Manager. If you go to the file import and export, while importing and exporting the file, you have the accounts here. This account, there are several accounts. One of the account is HCM data loader import and export. So HCM data loader import export has the endpoint as HCM data loader. So you should have whatever user is trying to connect to the cloud, whatever it is user trying to connect to this WSDL file should have access to this account. That authentication will be provided by this endpoint. That is the reason whenever you click on this endpoint, you can see the URL. What is the endpoint here? Okay, and it will ask for the username and password. It simplifies interaction with the cloud. So here I'm giving the username and password which has access to the cloud. So I'm giving username and password. Okay, then it means that you are setting the security in this train stop itself or in this navigation itself. In reality, if you had to write on your own Java or own programming language, typically you have to set all these things programmatically. So Java in this case typically do this. So JDeveloper typically do this all for us and automatically create a properties file which will have all these functionalities by default. Click next. So we have all this data. So click finish. So you have the, now keep observing the data controls here. Now we got two data controls here. One is the application module data control. Other one is the RB HDL web service 1 data control. This data control has these many operations. What operations? Number of methods, what is available in this data control, right? So we have two data control. One data control, the data source is database. Other data control is data source is web service. Both are available in your application module, basically. So we have both. When you have both, then you can play with both of these together. Okay, let's play it together. So we have seen previous example where typically we took the typically what we did, we took the data control of this test app model data control. We got this view objects here and we started playing, we're looking how the data is coming up. Okay, let us see how we can do with our how we can do with our web services. Okay, so what I will do, there are a few more fundamentals I have to cover, but I will quickly show an example. Now what I wanted to do, do you want it to show how I can interact with these web services in the same page what we have created already, or shall we create a new page? Maybe I will create a new page. So I'll get a new page. Okay, so here I'll create test my, first we will test it and then we will programmatically write the flow basically. Okay, test my HDL service. Okay, so what type you want to keep facelets or JSP? I want to keep facelets. I wanted to keep a blank page. When I click on OK, then typically you are creating a blank test my HDL service JSF page, which will have the 3 tags as I was saying before, right? F tag, AF tag, and form tag. Okay, so in this form tag, I can use my methods here. Okay, so here is my method. There are many methods. So one among the method is import and load data, and we know that import and load data take some parameters basically. So typically, if we import and load data is nothing but submitting the job. I had to take some parameters too. So import and load data, nothing but invoking enterprise service enterprise request job using the scheduler process and load and running the import and load data, or it's nothing but import and load data, whatever here. If the file is already in the content manager, you go to import file here and you go and choose the content ID and you go and submit here, right? If the file is, that's what you do. Once you submit it, typically what happens, so let me do. I just want the parameters, what this job will take. This job will take let's get it some local file and then we'll do. So I wanted to, okay. So basically I want to take all these parameters in one line actually. So I have a sample thing ready with me, I guess. So let me, when I was demonstrating the HDL DI to you last time, I think I created one. Yeah, so these are the parameters. So this is what I want. So content ID is one parameter, remaining all are in the second parameter. So this is the second parameter basically. So in order to give everything, I mean, whatever it is saying, import maximum errors is 100, load maximum errors is 100, load concurrent thread equal to, here actually given 8, but I have given 1 here. So yeah, it's going to take 2 parameters, right? So here, if you see the data loader is taking the 2 parameters, content ID and parameter. So we have the content ID. What is this content ID? This content ID is nothing but the content ID of the file, which is already available in the cloud. So I'm taking this content ID, which is already available in the cloud. Okay, so I'm taking that. This is the content ID, and these are the parameters which I'm forming in a line. Actually, those 2 parameters my program will take. Okay, so okay. Now let us see. Let's go back to my system. So now what I will do, I will take this import and load data program and I will drop it here. Then what is the JDeveloper has the intelligence, it will study how you want to create it on your user interface. You want to create as a form or you want to create as a method, as a button. I want to create as a form basically. Okay, so I want to create as a form. In the form you have 2 labels. You have 2 parameters basically. To study the WSDL file, it will identify, it takes 2 parameters. Okay, and what it will do, as a service takes an input and brings an output. So JDeveloper has the ability to study that. Okay, it is taking input. I will create 2 input text label. As getting 1 output, I'll create 1 output text label. But how do we know once input is filled? Basically, you create a button as well, saying that input, there are 2 input parameters, a button and an output field. That's how this JDeveloper creates a web service method. Basically, that has the ability. We can create any different ways. I can just create as a button as well. I can do many ways. So let us see how the page will get formed now. Okay, so see that it created 2 input text and input text 1, which actually takes the content ID as a parameter as the first input, and second one, which will take the remaining parameters, and we have an action button which actually triggers this program, basically import and load execute. This program nothing but calling the import and load data. Basically, this is what it's doing. Okay, so if you go and see the if I go and run this, basically it won't work much, but I will just show you how it will render the, okay, so let me run it. We just got just got a method, import and load data method, and it's launching the test connection, and it is going to deploy that on the server, and it will open up a page. That page will just have 2 input text and 1 button, actually no output text as well. I was thinking it will get output text as well, but we can create output text. Okay, so we got it. So if you go to the front end here, sorry, here we don't have any record yet. Okay, keep looking at that number of data sets. Now we are going to test it. Still redeploying it, still launching. So once we test it, once we are comfortable, connections are working, we are getting the expected data and things are flowing, then same invoking, clicking button is an invoke, right? That same invoking can be done programmatically as well using any of our model methods in our application module. We can invoke the same thing. Clicking the button is actually we are manually invoking again. So same thing we can automate as well using our typical Java programming too. I will show you that in a while. So we got the page opened, and it will have it should have 2 input texts. It should have 2 input texts. So what it will do, it will take content ID as input parameter and load parameters, 2 things, right? So we have the content ID, okay, and we have the program. So it has those 2. So till now we haven't written any programming. Actually, we haven't created any. We haven't written any system.out.println, just a log commands. We didn't write anything yet. Okay, so we are just using this one to just to trigger that concurrent job. Okay, so again I'm showing here. There's no the latest content ID is yeah, the latest content ID is 4173. Now once I click on this button, typically this content ID should show up in this list. Basically, when I click on this button, typically your program should get invoked here, which makes the file to keep running here. Okay, so and now again, when I'm not capturing the response anywhere here. So this program, typically what it happens, once the job runs, this job typically, once I invoke this web service, the web service should return this web service should return the result. I'm not capturing the result anywhere. I'm just displaying my web service. I just drag the web service here, and I'm invoking the web service using this import and load data. Okay, so I'm clicked it. Okay, so yeah, now let us go and see if we have anything populated here. See that this content ID populated here. It means that web service got invoked. Whatever content ID we passed, the web service got invoked, and this content ID, this data set started loading. Okay, so it's loading. Is what it did typically. If I go back to schedule process.
Hey, where did you place that file, worker.zip?
It's already there in the content ID, basically. It's already there in content manager. I didn't place it actually. It was already there in the content manager. That's why I took the content ID, which is already available in the content manager, and I ran that. So it was placed.
It is there in our file server then.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So can we place a file and test it?
Yeah, so let's do that as well. Okay, that is one thing. Let us placing the file. What I will do, I will use, we have a Java command which can place the file over that over the cloud actually. Okay, so let's do that. Let me run this job first. It is not a, it's again actually it's an inbuilt command given by the Oracle. So to get this command, typically we have to download one jar file called web content utility. So I'm going to share the steps how to get that. I'm going to share that steps here. How to get that jar file. Literally, you have to go to support portal and go to this downloads. In the downloads under Web Center content, we have that Web Center content 11G release 1. Download it. Once you download that, you get the jar file created like this. This is jar file. This is the file you get created. And once you have this file in your local system or your local server, then in this RADC subfolder, we have something called upload command. If you use the upload command, then automatically the file will get uploaded into the cloud. Once it, and this command will returns the content ID. Once you have the content ID, then again you can invoke this program, right? So I will show you that one as well, uploading the file. So let me, so it is my jar file and I'm using the upload tool command. The URL is, this is my URL. Get me the URL. And you have to, CS IDC PLG is nothing but, oh, sorry. CS IDC PLG nothing but content server. For example, if I go here, it's nothing but the content manager. See content, Web Center content. So I'm going to place a file in this location. Username is, I have my own username, and password I'm giving here. Typically we won't give password here. You have to generate it, you have to keep it in a private file. And while executing this command, at that time you have to extract it and pass it here. And primary file, what file you are trying to send here. So I will take some file. So I can take any file, maybe batch 3. We created some file like I'll take maybe this file, .zip file. Okay. And the document title, what you want to give the title. Maybe I will give the title as batch 3 worker file finance 2018. And what is the security group? Actually, we have given the security group as FA Fusion Export Import. That is Fusion Applications Import Export is a security group. And which account you are loading here? Again, we'll talk about some data loader import accounts. So, because when we load the data into the content manager, typically we will be giving the file import export. You will be mentioning the account, right? So that is the account you have to mention here. If you take this, and if you have the Java running in your let me open it from beginning. Your local server or your Unix machine, okay. So you have to just go here, make sure you have the proper version running in your. Typically, you should have 1.7 above should be good. So I have 1.8, so I should be good. So now I'm going to run this file. Okay, so let's run this. It is going to check in the universal content manager and it will return the content ID. So it is a content ID. If you go to the content manager again now, so I'm going to the, you can go to file import export or you can go to can anyways. So if my account is HCM import, and I click on search, I can see my surrogate ID V1 is here. See that? The one I just uploaded. So it is my content ID 2102194. 2102194. Once I have the content ID, what I can do? So I want to submit this job example. Okay, typically, how do you submit? If you do it manually, you will go to the My Workforce. You will go to Data Exchange. You will go to import and load data. Import and load data. And then what you do? If it is Universal Content Manager, you will just go to import file here and you will select what you wanted to do and click on submit. That's what if you do it manually. Or you will get import from local file and do that manually. We have two ways. You can import from Content Manager, import from local file. As file is already there in my okay. So let me refresh it so that. Okay, so see that latest content manager is not available. Now what I will do, whatever file I have loaded, this 2102194, I will trigger a job to load it here. How do I do that? Just copy it. So go to your machine here. Okay, now if I go and import and load data, then what typically should happen once I click the button, it should show up here. Okay. The previous one is still running though. It should show up here, right? So what I will do, I will go now and click on import and load data. Okay. Now I will keep refreshing it here. So it should, that file should come up here. So it's not coming up. Let's wait for some more time. Yeah, it's coming up here. See that? So it is what we created. We created the this is the file name we have given. It is a content ID. See that? Now it got triggered. How it got triggered? It triggered from our web service, the way we are calling it. So whatever I have done, loading the file is from local system, calling the web services from local system. I have done both the things. So what if I write a script? Same scenario. If I write a small script, right? So example, again, whatever the command I just shown you, the uploading the command, sorry, this Web Center content utility. This has both shell script, the upload command. If it is Windows, it is Windows file. If you use Unix, it is a shell script. You can call shell script as well. You can install you can have the jar file in your Unix server as well. Typically in our, that's what we do, right? A client server, and you can execute the same command what I executed. Basically, you can execute the same command what I executed from the Linux machine as well. You can do that. Okay. So what I will do, I will take this program, and I can, if I have the Unix or shell script, maybe or batch file. If I window shell script or batch file, typically what I will do. Write a script. Maybe first step is to prepare the file. I prepared the file in PL SQL program and load the file. Typically prepare the file. What I will do in shell, I will call PL SQL procedure. Okay, and what it will do, it will, let me prepare the PL SQL. I will call the PL SQL, prepare the file, call PL SQL. And what we do, PL SQL, what it should do, it should place the file on Linux machine. Okay, and load the file from the shell script, only load the file, get the content ID. And so whatever I have done till now, with that what we can, I'm saying, but we can do all these things in one program as well. I'm just telling, call Java program. In this case, it is our program basically. This program, by passing content ID. So what this program will do, take the content ID, and this program will kickstart the import and load. And this program can also ability to get the data status, and if anything is modified, if anything has to be done, any correction should happen, again it should has to call a PL SQL program or something like that to prepare the file again and keep doing this activity. Okay, so that's what I can do here. What I will do, I will enhance this program a little more. And typically what I'm thinking, maybe further we go, it's more programming. So what I will do, I will take the further classes only for the people who are interested. Maybe I'll take a special classes, maybe the weekend or 1 or 2 hours basically on those things. And can explain much more automation, whatever after this, getting the data status and keeping the count, these things I will take in a special class. Whoever interested can come that, and we can also have video for those people who won't come. It will be useful for them. And for tomorrow, I'm thinking maybe I should start with the outbound integrations. Let the outbound integration start tomorrow and keep continuing remaining topics. And these continuation of these web services we can take in a special classes, maybe the weekend or other classes, and we can cover there. That's what I'm thinking, because if we keep talking about these concepts, it will take a lot of time. So that's what I'm thinking. So if you are okay, then I'll start with outbound tomorrow and special classes for continuation of what we are here. So any
good idea, Lakshmi.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, can we start ODB and BI reports instead of outbound integrations? Or
right. So outbound integrations typically covers. Outbound integrations typically covers 3 things: reporting, that is a BI publisher and OTBI, and people who are HCM background. That is for extracts, basically. Those things will be covered in the outbound integration. So when I talk about outbound integration, then primarily I will be starting with OTBI. Maybe it will be interesting for everyone. And then I will talk about BA publisher. And then I will talk about extracts at the last. Once we complete these 3, it will become the outbound integration will complete, basically. Okay, does it work?
Yeah, Lakshmi.
Okay, and thank you for all your patience all these days. Let's resume tomorrow with the outbound integrations.
Okay, bye, Lakshmi. See you.
Bye. Thank you. Anyone has any questions, just shoot me, else we can drop off. Okay, no questions. Okay, then see you tomorrow with outbound integrations, and I'll schedule sometime this weekend or later about the remaining concepts of these web services. Okay. Okay, then thank you.